UFOs, unidentified flying objects. An intriguing subject, sure, unidentified means it could turn out to be virtually anything. But the default context of that term UFO to most people means alien spacecraft, and to a lesser degree, experimental government craft. Hey y'all, the real Jimmy Roberts one here. Now, in the 1970s, when I was growing up, people who claimed to see a UFO were usually sentenced to wearing a scarlet letter C for crazy. Now, I mean it. Man, that guy's weird. He thinks he saw a flying saucer. But in the 21st century, when nearly everyone has a good camera on their cell phone, we get so many pictures of UFOs that it's not deemed to be so cray-cray now. But we also have CGI, computer-generated imagery, and people who are good at using it, thus fooling us. And that creates another problem. Do we have any pictorial evidence of UFOs that we can verify as being authentic? And I'm talking about alien spacecraft. Yes, we do. Apollo 14 launched January 31st, 1971. On board were Alan Shepard, Stuart Roosa, and Edgar Mitchell. While in lunar orbit, Roosa took this picture with a 70mm Hasselblad camera. This photograph is cataloged as Magazine 71, letter Tom T. Let's brighten it for a second, and the moon really shows up. Now back to the original. It's pretty dark except for that white speck on the left side, so let's move in closer. When I first found this, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Consider the details here. A pair of landing skids, apparent antennas on one side, which seems to be the front, as the other end we find an attached contraption. And though we have no size reference, this is incredible. We ran it through a few filters, digging for more detail. And right here, it's most evident that there's a clamping apparatus extending at a 90-degree angle. So how in the world did NASA miss this? There's links to this image in the video description. It is housed with tens of thousands of other NASA images at the Lunar and Planetary Institute website. A number of years back, they took on the task of digitizing NASA's massive archive of Gemini and Apollo photographs, over 20,000 pictures, the vast majority of which had never been readily available to the public. My thinking is that when the images were initially scrubbed decades ago, meaning removing anything the public didn't need to see, that some things were perhaps missed. After all, this was a lot of photographs spread over a couple of decades, and in 1971, who would have ever thought a process called digitization would be developed where the images would be available to anyone 40 some odd years later? So, in other words, I just don't think they were always that dang meticulous. As for the modern day digitizers themselves, well, they just imaged the old photographs and cataloged them. I caught on to this, and I looked at thousands of them. And this isn't their only oopsie. Okay, first, let there be light, please. Also Apollo 14, and notice this is photo 9906. That's only 5 photos prior to the one we just saw. And moving in closer, what do we have here? There's detail, but it's weird. Taken so close to the first image, I wondered if this is the same UFO, but I can't match anything with it, so it's likely this is a different craft altogether. But even when changing orientation, it's hard to make heads nor tails of this thing. This is also from Apollo 14, image 9892, so this is much earlier in the film roll than the other two, and you've got to wonder how I even saw this. Look, I don't spend my whole life here, folks, believe me. I'm just, let's say, curiously observant? Yeah, let's call it that. How about Apollo 13, the mission of infamy? There's Commander Jim Lovell. Just kidding. There he be. And though they didn't land on the moon as planned, they did get some 70mm Hasselblad pictures as they did that slingshot maneuver around it. Now, it's interesting in that with these images, whomever did the original retake for scrubbing actually did it in a manner to where we can see the edge of the overlay. Well, this is great because it's something we've heard about, and here we finally see some visual proof of that tomfoolery, those rascals. But they missed things. Take a look at this trio of unidentified spacecraft. There's some decent resolution here and some distinct features are evident. Everything we are seeing today, every flying craft, are the greatest of the UFO images ever taken because the images are documented by NASA. We know who took them and when and where. They are official. What more do you need? Okay, so the cool thing about this unusually shaped UFO is that just moments later, there's another image of it. Image 8755, starting near where the overlay is visible, there's a pair of UFOs. And then this bad boy, and this guy. Image 8728 provides us with a possible shadow of a flying craft below. And finally, a few more interestingly shaped UFOs. Back to Apollo 14, there really seemed to be a lot of activity around the moon. Here's some examples of when we'd work the brightness to bring forth objects reflecting off the sunlight. A lot of these are mistaken as stars until increasing the brightness because they'd have areas where light were reflected more. A lot of this may seem a little too good to be true, but I assure you, it's there. One of the most interesting images where we had to bring forth a very dim object was from Apollo 16's image of the far side of the moon. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we humans had any space stations at the moon in 1972. And yes, that was a facetious remark. Look, there was a whole lot of evidence left in the Apollo images. The fact is, folks, we have never been alone.